Hello students, today we are going to start with lesson 3, Discovering Tut the Saga Continues, written by A.R. Williams. Now A.R. Williams, he has written a report on Tut, one of the teenage pharaohs who was the last heir of the very powerful dynasty of Egypt. And this dynasty ruled for a long time. Now Tut's father or grandfather, Amenhotep III, he was a very powerful pharaoh and he ruled for almost 4 decades. And his rule is called the golden age of this dynasty. His son Amenhotep IV succeeded him and promoted the worship of Aten, that is the sun disk. And he also changed the religious capital Thebes to Amarna. Now after his death, a mysterious ruler named Semenkhare, he came to the throne and he ruled this place and he disappeared very soon. Now we'll go ahead with the story through the textbook. So just get ready with the text and I'll start with the explanation further. Okay children? He was just a teenager when he died, the last heir of a powerful family that had ruled Egypt and its empire for centuries. He was laid to rest laden with gold and eventually forgotten. Since the discovery of his tomb in 1922, the modern world has speculated about what happened to him, with murder being the most extreme possibility. Now, leaving his tomb for the first time in almost 80 years, Tut has undergone a CT scan that offers new clues about his life and death and provides precise data for an accurate forensic reconstruction of the boyish pharaoh. Now, Tut, he was a teenager. He died at very early age. And when his tomb was discovered in the year 1922, there was many speculations about his death, and so it was decided that this Tut has to undergo a CT scan so that they can get the clues about his death, that whether it was it was a murder because he died at a very early age. So there was quite an extreme possibility that he was being murdered. So at last it was decided that a CT scan should be done of his mummy so that it could be finally found out. We can just prove that whether it was a murder or not. An angry wind stirred up ghostly dust devils as King Tut was taken from his resting place in the ancient Egyptian cemetery known as the Valley of the Kings. Dark-bellied clouds had scudded across the desert sky all day and now were revealing the stars in cascade grey. It was 6 p.m. on 5th January 2005. The world's most famous mummy glided head first into a CT scanner brought here to probe the lingering medical mysteries of this little understood young ruler who died more than 3,300 years ago. Now when the mummy was going to be removed from the tomb, at that time suddenly the weather changes and scudded across the desert sky. Scudded means the strong wind started. Scudding means to have great speed. So the strong wind started blowing and the sky also turned to grey. It was 6 p.m. on 5th January 2005 and this world's most famous mummy was to be taken out from the tomb for the CT scanning. And this king who died more than 3,300 years ago. Now all afternoon the usual line of tourists from around the world had descended into the cramped rock-cut tomb some 26 feet underground to pay their respects. They gazed at the murals on the walls of the burial chamber and peered at Tut's glided face. The most striking feature of his mummy shaped outer coffin lid. Some visitors read from guidebooks in a whisper, others stood silently, perhaps pondering Tut's untimely death in his late teens, or wondering with a shiver if the Pharaoh's curse, death or misfortune falling upon those who disturbed him, was really true. Now, when the mummy was being removed from the tomb at that time, that is on 5th January 2005, many tourists had gathered from the different places around the world. They had come over here to just pay their respect to this great king, and they had gathered over here. Some of them, they were busy reading the guidebooks over there. Some were just looking at the pharaoh's, the king's face and tomb, which was being made up with gold, and some were just thinking about his curse, because superstition prevailed that if anyone tried to disturb the mummy, then a misfortune would fall on them, or maybe the person also would die. Now the mummy is in very bad condition because of what Carter did in 1920s, said Zahi Hawass, who was the Secretary General of Egypt's Supreme Council of Antiquities, as he leaned over the body for a long first look. Howard Carter, that is, was the British archaeologist who in 1922 discovered Tut's tomb after years of futile searching. Its contents, though hastily ransacked in antiquity, were surprisingly complete. They remain the richest royal collection ever found and have become part of the pharaoh's legend. Stunning artifacts in gold, their eternal brilliance meant to guarantee resurrection, caused a sensation at the time of the discovery and still get the most attention. But Tut was also buried with everyday things he would want in the afterlife, that is, board games, a bronze razor, linen undergarments, cases of food, and wine. Now this mummy was in very bad condition. That was being told by Carter in 1920, said Zahi Hawass, because Carter, when he found this mummy, at that time he saw that it was in a very bad condition. Now Zahi Hawass, who was the Secretary of the General, he was the Secretary General of Egypt's Supreme Council of Antiquities. He just had a long look, first look at the mummy, and he saw that there was a richest royal collection ever he had seen in his life. It shows that this person, this king, he was a very wealthy king, because he had, whatever collection he had was made up of gold, and the things like board games, bronze razor, linen undergarments, cases of food and wine, everything was placed as if though the king would come back after, means he would return back and he would live his life with all these things. Now the British archaeologist, that is Howard Carter, he discovered the tomb of King Tut in 1922, and the resins used in the last rites had hardened and cemented the mummy of the young king to the bottom of the solid gold coffin. And I can see that it had become much solid that it could not be removed from the coffin. After months of carefully recording the pharaoh's funerary treasures, Carter began investigating his three nested coffins. Opening the first, he found a shroud adorned with garlands of willow and olive leaves, wild celery, lotus petals, and cornflowers, the faded evidence of a burial in March or April. So when he opened the first coffin, he found that the shroud It was adorned with the garlands of willow and olive leaves. And this olive and willow leaves and the wild celery, cornflowers, these are the plants and flowers, leaves which could be found only in the month of March or April. That means it was a proof that he was buried in this month of March or April. When he finally reached the mummy, though he ran into trouble, the ritual resins had hardened, cementing tucked to the bottom of his solid gold coffin. No amount of legitimate force could remove them. Carter wrote later what was to be done. So, when he opened, he just reached the mummy. It was a very big difficulty. It was a great difficulty for him because the ritual resins it had hardened up the mummy in that condition that he could not remove the mummy from the coffin. And he was now tensed up that how could he remove it for the CT scan. The sun can beat down like a hammer this far south in Egypt, and Carter tried to use it to loosen the resins. For several hours he sat the mummy outside in blazing sunshine that heated it to 149 degrees Fahrenheit. Nothing budged. He reported with scientific detachment that the consolidated material had to be chiseled away from beneath the limbs and trunk before it was possible to raise the king's remains. So now Carter he thought that only the sun could beat this mummy, and so means it would the solid would be rusted, or it could be just melted down because of this sun, and then it would be easy to remove the mummy out of that tomb. So Carter tried to use it to loosen the resins for several hours. He sat the mummy outside the blazing sunshine. The mummy was kept outside in the blazing sunshine, and it was heated up to 149 degrees Fahrenheit. And so that the solid part which was attached down at the bottom of the coffin, it could be removed because of the heat. They could remove the mummy out of the coffin. In his defense, Carter really had little choice. If he hadn't cut the mummy free, thieves most certainly would have circumvented the guards and ripped it apart to remove the gold. Carter, he had only one choice, that if he would have not removed the parts of the mummy, then what if he would have kept the mummy there for, means during the night he would have kept there, then the thieves would have stolen the gold, which was the coffin also was made of gold, and the whatever things were there inside the coffin also, means totally it was made up of gold. So the thieves would have stolen all the gold, and they would have just thrown away the mummy in a they would have thrown it out over there only, and they would have left the mummy in a very bad condition. So the thieves most certainly would have circumvented, means they would have circumvented, means they have avoided the guards, and they would have ripped away, they would have removed the gold. In that time the royals were fabulously wealthy and thought or hoped they could take their riches with them. For his journey to the great beyond, King Tut was lavished with glittering goods, precious collars, inlaid necklaces and bracelets, rings, amulets, a ceremonial apron, sandals, sheaths for his fingers and toes, and the new iconic inner coffin and mask, all of pure gold. So it was believed that after the death also, the king should be lavished with all the golden ornaments. And to separate Tut from his adornments, Carter's men removed the mummy's head and severed nearly every major joint. Now these all adornments which were made of pure gold, so to remove the mummy from this adornments, it was too difficult. So the mummy's head was to be removed from its joint. Once they had finished, they reassembled the remains on a layer of the sand in a wooden box with padding that concealed the damage. The bed where Tut now rest. So now then they had to again reassemble it. It has changed substantially in the intervening decades, focusing less on treasure and more on the fascinating details of life and intriguing mysteries of death. It also uses more sophisticated tools, including medical technology. Now the archaeology, now it has changed. Now they are much interested in finding out the mysteries of the death rather than their treasure and finding about the details of the life. Now it also uses more sophisticated tools including medical technology. In 1968, more than 40 years after Carter's discovery, an anatomy professor x-rayed the mummy and revealed a startling fact beneath the resin that cakes his chest, his breastbone and front ribs were missing. Now in 1968, more than 40 years after Carter's discovery of this mummy, an anatomy professor x-rayed this mummy and he revealed a very surprising fact that beneath the resin that cakes his chest, his breastbone and his front ribs, they were missing. Today, diagnostic imaging can be done with computed tomography or CT, by which hundreds of X-rays in cross-section are put together like slices of bread to create a three-dimensional virtual body. What more would a CT scan reveal of that than the X-ray? And could it answer two of the biggest questions still lingering about him? How did he die? And how old was he at the time of his death? These were the two main questions that were still lingering, that were not yet clear. King Tut's demise was a big event, even by royal standard. He was the last of his family line and his funeral was the death rattle of dynasty. But the particulars of his passing away and its aftermath are still unclear. Now King Tut's demise, his death was a very big event even by the royal standard because he was the last of his dynasty, of his family, and it was his the mystery of his death was still unclear. Amenhotep III, that is Tut's father or grandfather, was a very powerful king who ruled for almost 4 decades, and his son Amenhotep IV succeeded him, and he initiated one of the strangest periods in the history of ancient Egypt. The new pharaoh promoted the worship of the Aten, the sun disk, changed his name to Akhenaten or servant of the Aten, and moved the religious capital from the old city of Thebes to the new city of Akhenaten, known as Amarna. He further shocked the country by attacking Amun, a major god, smashing his images and closing his temples. It must have been a horrific time, said Ray Thompson, director of the University of Chicago's Research Center in Luxor, the site of ancient Thebes. Now the family that had ruled for centuries was coming to an end, and then Akhenaten went a little waking. Now, as I told you earlier, that Amenhotep III, maybe he was Tut's father or grandfather, was a very powerful king, and he ruled almost for 4 decades. And then his son Amenhotep IV, he succeeded to the throne, and this new king he promoted the worship of Aten, that is the sun disk, and he also changed the religious capital, that was Thebes, to the new city of Akhenaten, and it was known as Amarna. Now this time was a horrific time because he was smashing the images and closing the temples of God. And after his death, that is after Akhenaten's death, a mysterious ruler named Semenkhare appeared briefly and excited with hardly a trace. And then a very young, means he was a very mysterious ruler. And he took over the throne, and very soon he disappeared. And then after, that is Semenkhare, after him there came a very young Tutankhaten who took the throne. And this king Tut, as he is widely known today, now he is known by the name of Tut. The boy king soon changed his name to
Tutankhamun, living image of Amun, and oversaw a restoration of the old ways. He reigned for about 9 years and then he died unexpectedly. His death was unexpected because he ruled for only for 9 years and he died at a very young age. So his death was a mystery. Regardless of his fame and the speculations about his fate, Tut is one mummy among many in Egypt. How many? No one knows. The Egyptian Mummy Project, which began in inventory in late 2003, has recorded almost 600 so far and is still counting. The next phase, scanning the mummies with a portable CT machine donated by the National Geographic Society and Siemens, its manufacturer. King Tut is one of the first mummies to be scanned, in death as in life, moving regally ahead of his country, man. So it was the first mummy which was to be scanned because his mystery, the mystery of his death was still unclear. So in order to find out the mystery of his death to be cleared off, his mummy was to be scanned. A CT machine scanned the mummy head to toe, creating 1,700 digital X-ray images in cross section. Tut's head, scanned in 0.62 millimeters, slices to register its intricate structures, takes on eerie detail in the resulting image. So the CT machine scanned the mummy from top to bottom, that is from head to toe, creating 1,700 digital X-rays were being taken off. And his head was scanned in 0.62 millimeter slices to register his intricate structures. And an eerie detail, eerie means very creepy detail was being taken off. With Tut's entire body similarly recorded, a team of specialists in radiology, forensic and anatomy began to probe the secrets that the winged goddesses of a glided burial shrine protected for so long. For so many years, though it was lying, as I told you, it was lying here from more than 3,300 years ago. So from that time, yet still it was in the same condition. That means, and it was been believed that the goddess of glided burial, it was protecting this tomb, this mummy of the King Tut. The night of the scan, workmen carried Tut from the tomb in his box. Like pallbearers, they climbed a ramp and flight of stairs into the swirling sand outside, then rose on a hydrochloric lift into the trailer that held the scanner. 20 minutes later, two men emerged, sprinted off for an office nearby and returned with a pair of white plastic pens. The $1 million scanner had quit because of sand in a cooler fan. Curse of furrow, joked the guard nervously. So when this all process was going on about scanning, at that time there was a violent wind was blowing, and whatever means things they had brought, they were just being damaged because of this wind. And the $1 million scanner had quit because of the sand in a cooler fan. And the people, those who were there, means the guard, those who were there, they just thought that it was the curse. As we know that there was superstition believed that prevailed at that time, that if anyone tried even to touch the tomb or the mummy of the king, then the person would either meet with death or he would meet with a bad fortune. So maybe because of that, all these things was happening during that process which was going on. Now, as I told you that the mummy, it was carried by the hydraulic lift to the trailer, but one of the cooler fans of the scanner, it stopped working because as I told, the strong wind was blowing and the sand got into the fan, and that fan was replaced with a spare one, means another fan which they had, and the work of scanning was completed with that substitute fan. Eventually the substitute fans worked well enough to finish the procedure, means now they were able to complete the procedure of scanning. After checking that no data had been lost, The technicians turned it over to the workman who carried him back to his tomb. Less than 3 hours after he was removed from his coffin, the pharaoh again rested in peace where the funerary priest had laid him so long. And so after means less than 3 hours after he was removed from the coffin, now again the king he rested in that same place where he was buried earlier. Back in the trailer, a technician pulled up astonishing images of such on a computer screen. The grey head took shape from a scattering of pixels and the technician spun and tilted it in every direction. Neck vertebrae appeared as clearly as in an anatomy. Other images revealed a hand, several views of the rib cage, a transection of the skull. But for now the pressure was off. Sitting back in his chair, Zahir Hawa smiled, visibly relieved that nothing had gone seriously wrong. I didn't sleep last night, not for a second, he said. I was so worried, but now I think I will go and sleep. Now Zahir Hawass, who was the Secretary General of Egypt's Supreme Council of Antiquities, he was scared that more damage would be caused to the mummy, that city scan. However, when everything went according to their plan, he heaved a sigh of relief. Left the trailer. Descending metal stairs to the sandy ground, the wind had stopped. The winter air lay cold and still, like death itself in this valley of the departed. Just above the entrance to Tut's tomb stood Orion, the constellation that the ancient Egyptian knew as the soul of Osiris, the god of afterlife, watching over the boy king. That means when the process of the CT scan got over, at that time the wind also means stopped. And when these people, they had removed all the things from there and they were just leaving the place, the wind subsided and the cold winds started blowing, and there stood the Orion, was the constellation of the ancient Egyptian, which was known as the soul of Osiris. Means the god who was taking care of the we can say mummies after their death. So it was really believed that after the death also there were those who were just looking at the or taking watch, keeping watch over the people, those who were dead, over the mummies. So here at the when this work was over of the CT scan and when all the people they just moved laying the mummy in that same tomb where he was earlier buried, the wind again stopped and everything was just as it was earlier, and as if though the constellation, that is the Orion, the constellation of the ancient Egyptian, it were just standing over there to keep watch over this pharaoh who had died more than 3300 years ago. So here we end with this lesson, that is discovering Tut, who died at a very early age and why his body needed to be CT scanned. So then after this we are going to start with the next chapter of the same, that is your English text Hornbill. So till then, goodbye.